The Second Amendment, the meaning, the intent, the right, and the need. A topic of much debate here in 21st century America is the Second Amendment. A lot of people ask questions about what it means, what was the intent behind it by the people who wrote it, what does that meaning mean today, and does it still apply to modern day America? Well, sit back and relax, because in the next 10 minutes, I intend to explain it all to you. We first must look at the wording of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The way this is worded is generally confusing to us in modern day America because people don't talk like this anymore. So, the language becomes foreign to us. The framers speak about things like a militia, the state, arms, and even bears. Those who are against our individual right to bear arms will immediately point out the words well-regulated militia. Then generally, with no context, butcher the word's meaning from the 18th century. To understand the context this amendment was written in, or any other part of the Constitution, you have to first go back to the 18th century and understand the mindset of the framers in 1788 and understand their language. They had just fought a war with a tyrannical government, the British government, for independence from that government. This war was fought for 5 years, a war fought with firearms and started when the British attempted to take away or seize the colonists' weapons. With the war now behind them, foremost in their minds, and America now being a loose grouping of individual states, the people of the great nation realized they needed to join together to form a union. However, that union could mean the exact same problem they just finished fighting. If power was given and replaced in the hands of just a few people, it could be another war. So, the framers set forth with one goal in mind: to pen the founding documents of our nation in a manner that would limit the power of the government and give that power back to the people. So the first question becomes, who regulates the militia? What reason would the framers have to allow the regulation of a militia by the government if their intent was to give the power back to the people? The simple answer is that they didn't. The term well-regulated does not refer to the definition to control or supervise by means of rules and regulations. The term well-regulated was a common term in the late 18th century, which was used to describe something which was working or functioning properly. If something was working well or properly, it was said to be well-regulated. The Second Amendment called for a functional militia, and the next thing, which is claimed by Second Amendment detractors, is that only a militia can have firearms. That was the framers' intention. This brings us to our next question. If the militia are the only ones allowed to possess firearms, then who is the militia? The father of the Bill of Rights was George Mason. He said it best during his address, arguing for the ratification of the Constitution in Virginia in 1788. He stated, "I ask, sir, what is the militia? Is it the whole people except for a few public officials? Yes, it is. The whole people means everyone. You, me, your neighbor, everyone." You can get an even more in-depth understanding of the word militia by looking at the wording of the Second Amendment while it worked its way through Congress. The version of the Second Amendment, which was sent to the House of Representatives from the Senate on August 24, 1788, said, "A well-regulated militia, being composed of the body of the people, being the best security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." The framers understood the right of the people to keep and bear arms was inalienable, a right that someone has simply by existing. This understanding was not questioned nor debated. What the framers knew was that future politicians, easily susceptible to corruption, would misinterpret and bastardize their words and their intent to fit their needs and agenda. Therefore, After long debate and using the language that was available to them at the time, the framers put forth the final version from the House of Representatives on September 21st, 1789, which stated, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A functioning militia comprised of all the people is necessary to the security of a free state." What state are they talking about, though? Massachusetts, Virginia, New York, the Union as a whole? Free state can be understood to mean a bunch of different things, just like the term well-regulated. However, we need to understand what the founders intended. In 18th century politics, free state was understood to mean free country or nation. The term free state was not used in that time to refer to any single specific government entity. It referred specifically to the people themselves. To put it into modern day language, the first statement of the Second Amendment, if it was written today, would most likely sound something like this: "A well-functioning militia comprised of every person of this nation is necessary to a free country." The part that follows this cannot be misunderstood or misinterpreted, even in today's language or understanding. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There are two important and explicit statements. First, well-armed people are necessary to the security of a free state. Second, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What does infringed mean? It meant the same thing in 1789 as it does today. Infringed means to act so as to limit or undermine. The meaning of the term infringed was respected and understood from the time it was penned by our constitutional framers until the 1934 National Firearms Act. While it is true that the founders may not have been able to foresee the types of weapons that currently exist in modern-day America, they did not limit themselves to muskets when fighting the British. They used muskets, cannons, howitzers, every weapon they could defend themselves, their countrymen, and secure their freedom to protect their inalienable rights. To put it a different way, they fought like with like. Being as we understand that the founders feared that the new government could one day become corrupted and thus tyrannical, if you ask yourself honestly and logically, the answer is clear as to what types of weapons should be available to the public or to the people. Again, pointing to shall not be infringed. There were many things that did not exist at the time of the Second Amendment when it was first penned. For example, computers did not exist. Does that mean that the First Amendment to freedom of speech does not extend to computers? Of course not. The intent for the Second Amendment is the same. It was written to ensure that the people would always be able to stand up against a tyrannical government backed by a military force and thus be able to defend themselves and ensure the protection of their rights. The intention of the framers is clearly explained in Federalist Papers number 28, written by Alexander Hamilton and published on December 26, 1787, in which Alexander Hamilton wrote, "If the representatives of the people betray their constituents, there is then no recourse left but in the exertion of that original right of self-defense which is paramount to all positive forms of government, and which against the usurpations of the national rulers may be exerted with infinitely better prospect of success than against those of the rulers of an individual state. In a single state, if the persons entrusted with supreme power become usurpers, the different parcels, subdivisions, or districts of which it consists, having no distinct government in each, can take no regular measures for defense. The citizens must rush tumultuously to arms, without concert, without system, without resource, except in their courage and despair." In the Federalist Papers, number 29, published on January 29, 1788, Hamilton further explained the meaning and intention of the Second Amendment when he wrote, But if circumstances at any time oblige the government to form an army of any magnitude, that army can never be formidable to the liberties of the people, while there is a large body of citizens, little if at all inferior to them, in discipline and use of arms, who stand ready to defend their rights. In Federalist Papers number 46, published on January 29, 1788, James Madison, the author of the Second Amendment, wrote, "The Constitution preserves the advantage of being armed, which Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation, where the governments are afraid to trust the people with arms." On June 5, 1778, Patrick Henry, in his speech to the Virginia Ratifying Convention, said, "Guard with jealous intention the public liberty. Suspect everyone who approaches that jewel. Unfortunately, nothing will preserve it but downright force. Whenever you give up that force, you are ruined. The great object is that every man be armed. Everyone who is able might have a gun." On November 13, 1787, Thomas Jefferson, in a letter to William Smith, wrote, "What country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The remedy is to set them right as to facts, pardon and pacify them. What signify a few lives lost in a century or two? The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its politicians are still human and susceptible to corruption and greed, easily made to turn tyrannical in their search to obtain power. This was pointed out in the 19th century by Baron Acton, John Emmerich Edward Dahlberg Acton, 1st Baron Acton, from 1834 to 1902, the historian and moralist who was otherwise known simply as Lord Acton, expressed this exact opinion in a letter to Bishop Mandel Creighton in 1887, in which he stated, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. For anyone who would say that the Second Amendment is outdated, I would assume then that men are no longer corruptible, and that throughout history, the millions of unarmed people who died did not die at the hands of those same corrupt men, and that as the hands of government reach further and further into your everyday lives, that nothing will ever go wrong. If this is your argument, you are delusional, and I need only refer you to these words. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." To my detractors who would try to say that I am wrong, I say simply this. I have shown you multiple arguments from the Founding Fathers and constitutional framers in support of the people's right to keep and bear arms and what their intentions were when they wrote it. Show me one argument from a Founding Father or constitutional framer against an individual's right to keep and bear arms. Just one. For the rest of us, please share this with everyone as much as you can to make sure that everyone knows what I've said. The more you know, the more you're informed. Stay vigilant.